Vladimir Putin, a name synonymous with modern Russia, has a life story that reads like a gripping, and often dark, political thriller. Born on October 7, 1952, in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, his early life was marked by the hardships of post-war Soviet Union. His father, Vladimir Spiridonovich Putin, was a factory foreman and a World War II veteran, while his mother, Maria Ivanovna Shelemova, worked in a factory. The family lived in a communal apartment, a far cry from the opulent palaces Putin would one day call home. Young Vladimir was a scrappy kid, often getting into fights but showing a keen interest in sports, particularly judo, which would later become a metaphor for his political maneuvers. Putin's childhood was tough, and it shaped his worldview. He was a diligent student with a knack for languages, and by his teenage years, he harbored dreams of becoming a spy. This ambition led him to study law at Leningrad State University, where he graduated in 1975. It was here that he caught the eye of the KGB, the Soviet Union's infamous security agency. Putin's career in the KGB began in 1975, where he initially worked in counterintelligence before being stationed in Dresden, East Germany. His work involved gathering intelligence and monitoring the activities of NATO forces. This period was formative for Putin, honing his skills in espionage and information warfare, which would become critical in his later political life. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union were turning points in Putin's life. Returning to a vastly changed Russia, he found himself in a country grappling with chaos and uncertainty. He left the KGB in 1991 with the rank of lieutenant colonel and moved into politics. Putin's entry into the political arena began in St. Petersburg, where he worked as an advisor to Mayor Anatoly Sobchak. His reputation as a loyal and efficient bureaucrat grew, and he quickly climbed the political ladder. By 1996, Putin had moved to Moscow, taking on a series of administrative roles in President Boris Yeltsin's government. His big break came in 1998 when he was appointed head of the Federal Security Service, FSB, the KGB's successor. His tenure at the FSB was marked by a crackdown on corruption and organized crime, efforts that bolstered his image as a tough, no-nonsense leader. In 1999, amidst a backdrop of economic turmoil and the war in Chechnya, Yeltsin appointed Putin as prime minister. Later that year, Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned, naming Putin as his successor. Putin's rise to power was meteoric, but it was also shrouded in controversy and brutality. His initial tenure as acting president saw the Second Chechen War, a brutal conflict that resulted in significant civilian casualties. The war was characterized by allegations of human rights abuses, including the indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas and the torture of prisoners. Despite the horrors of the Chechen War, or perhaps because of them, Putin's popularity soared. Many Russians saw him as the strong leader needed to restore order and rebuild the nation. In 2000, Putin was elected president in a landslide victory. His first term was marked by efforts to centralize power and assert control over Russia's vast and unwieldy political landscape. He introduced sweeping reforms that strengthened the presidency at the expense of regional governors and the parliament. This centralization of power was accompanied by a ruthless suppression of dissent. Independent media outlets were brought under state control, and political opponents were marginalized, imprisoned, or forced into exile. The case of Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the oligarch who dared to challenge Putin's authority, is a prime example. Khodorkovsky was arrested in 2003 on charges of fraud and tax evasion, and his oil company, Yukos, was dismantled and absorbed by the state. Putin's second term began in 2004, and it was during this period that his brand of authoritarianism became even more pronounced. the assassination of journalist Anna Politkovskaya in 2006 and the poisoning of former FSB agent Alexander Litvinenko in London that same year highlighted the lengths to which Putin's regime would go to silence its critics. Internationally, Putin's Russia became more assertive and antagonistic. The invasion of Georgia in 2008 was a clear signal that Russia would not hesitate to use military force to achieve its geopolitical goals. As Putin's power grew, so did the cult of personality around him. He cultivated an image of a macho, no-nonsense leader, often appearing in photo ops riding horses shirtless, practicing judo, or engaging in extreme sports. This carefully crafted image resonated with many Russians, who saw him as a symbol of strength and stability. Meanwhile, the Russian economy benefited from rising oil prices, which helped improve living standards and further cement Putin's popularity. In 2008, due to constitutional term limits, Putin stepped down as president but retained power by becoming prime minister under his hand-picked successor, Dmitry Medvedev. This period, often seen as a mere formality, allowed Putin to continue wielding significant influence behind the scenes. In 2012, he returned to the presidency amid widespread allegations of electoral fraud and significant protests. Despite these challenges, he won the election and began another term, which saw an intensification of his authoritarian tactics. One of the most significant events of Putin's third term was the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Following the Euromaidan protests and the ousting of Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, Russia moved swiftly to annex Crimea, citing the need to protect Russian-speaking populations. The move was widely condemned by the international community and led to a series of sanctions against Russia. However, domestically, it bolstered Putin's approval ratings, as many Russians saw it as the reclaiming of historically Russian territory. The conflict in Ukraine also marked a new chapter in Putin's foreign policy, characterized by a more aggressive stance against the West. This period saw the Russian military's involvement in Syria, supporting Bashar al-Assad's regime, and allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. These actions further strained relations with Western countries but demonstrated Putin's willingness to challenge the global order and assert Russia's influence on the world stage. Domestically, Putin continued to consolidate power, often through brutal means. Opposition leaders like Boris Nemtsov, who was assassinated near the Kremlin in 2015, and Alexei Navalny, who survived a poisoning attempt in 2020 and was later imprisoned, faced severe repression. The Kremlin's control over the media and the electoral process ensured that any real political competition was effectively neutralized. Protests were met with heavy-handed police responses, and laws were enacted to stifle dissent. Despite the growing authoritarianism, Putin maintained a veneer of democratic legitimacy. Elections continued to be held, although they were heavily rigged in favor of the ruling party. The economy, while facing challenges such as sanctions and falling oil prices, remained relatively stable, and Putin's government invested in large infrastructure projects to boost national pride. The hosting of the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi and the 2018 FIFA World Cup were part of this strategy, showcasing Russia's ability to stage major international events. Putin's personal life, often shrouded in secrecy, occasionally provided glimpses into his complex character. He divorced his wife, Lyudmila, in 2013 after nearly 3 decades of marriage, a rare admission of personal change in a leader who projected an image of unyielding stability. Rumors about his relationships and the lavish lifestyles of his daughters added to the intrigue surrounding him. Despite these personal developments, Putin remained focused on his political ambitions, showing little sign of slowing down. As his fourth term as president began in 2018, Putin faced new challenges, including economic stagnation and growing public dissatisfaction. The COVID-19 pandemic further tested his leadership, with initial missteps and a struggling healthcare system drawing criticism. However, Putin's government managed to roll out a vaccine, Sputnik V, which became a point of national pride despite skepticism from the international scientific community. Throughout his career, Putin's actions have often been viewed through the lens of his KGB training, strategic, ruthless, and always several steps ahead of his opponents. His ability to maintain power for over 2 decades is a testament to his political savvy and willingness to use whatever means necessary to achieve his goals. Whether through manipulating the media, rigging elections, or deploying military force, Putin has shown a relentless drive to restore what he sees as Russia's rightful place in the world. The brutal methods used to manage competitors and maintain control have left a dark legacy. Human rights organizations have documented numerous cases of political repression, torture, and extrajudicial killings linked to his regime. The crackdown on LGBTQ+ rights, the suppression of free speech, and the persecution of minority groups have painted a grim picture of life under Putin's rule. Internationally, his actions have led to conflicts and crises that have caused widespread suffering and instability. Yet, despite the horrors and the brutality, Putin's story is undeniably compelling. It's a tale of a man who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful and controversial figures in the world. His ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Russian politics, his strategic mind, and his unyielding determination have made him a central figure in contemporary history. As we look to the future, the question remains: what will be the ultimate legacy of Vladimir Putin? Will he be remembered as a leader who restored Russia's pride and power, or as a tyrant who crushed dissent and sowed discord? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the story of Vladimir Putin is far from over. In conclusion, Vladimir Putin's life is a complex tapestry of ambition, power, and controversy. From his early days in a communal apartment in Leningrad to his rise as a global power broker, Putin has navigated his path with a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless determination. His methods, often brutal and authoritarian, have ensured his dominance, but at a significant cost to human rights and international stability. As he continues to shape Russia and its role in the world, the impact of his leadership will be felt for generations to come.